I never thought a quiet weekend in the woods would turn into a full-blown raid, but that's exactly what happened. My name's Claire, and I rented a peaceful cabin deep in the forest near a small town called Fairpine. I just wanted to get away from everything: social media, stress, the chaos of city life. No. I even turned off my IG and Facebook notifications just to soak in the calm. But that peace didn't last long. From the moment I arrived, I had a strange feeling about the property. It was beautiful. No doubt, big porch, tall pines, even a small creek running nearby. But there was a woman next door who kept staring. Her name was Linda, though the locals called her HOA Karen. She wasn't actually part of any official homeowners association, but she liked to pretend she ran the whole area. She warned me about rules I'd never heard of: no outdoor fires, no loud music, no guests. I brushed it off as typical nosy neighbor stuff. I mean, I was alone. Who was I bothering? But then things escalated. First, she came over with a clipboard, demanding to inspect the cabin. Next, she claimed I had violated noise ordinances because I was playing music on my phone while sitting on the porch. It was all harmless until Friday night rolled around. That's when everything went sideways. I had just finished making dinner simple. Stuff I'd grabbed from Lowe's earlier that day when I noticed a black SUV parked outside the cabin. Then two men in dark clothes came up the steps. They looked like law enforcement, but something was off. No badges, no clear markings, just walkie-talkies and dark jackets that said security. One of them yelled that they were there for an inspection and that I needed to come outside immediately before I could respond. The door was forced open. But what none of them knew, what HOA Karen didn't know either, was that I wasn't alone. In that cabin, the FBI was inside. It's not because of me, but because the cabin had been under surveillance for something else entirely. And when those fake cops busted in unannounced, things didn't go as planned. ... The second the door flew open, I dropped my fork and froze. The men stormed in like they owned the place, flashing fake badges that didn't even look real up close. One of them barked, "We've had reports of illegal activity on the property. Step aside." I backed up slowly, heart pounding, trying to understand what was happening. This couldn't be real. Who were these people? Why were they targeting me? Before I could say anything, I heard movement from the back room. A man stepped out, mid-40s, clean cut, and definitely not part of the chaos. He raised his voice, steady and commanding. "Federal agents. Put your hands where I can see them." That's when it hit me. This wasn't a simple getaway cabin. I'd unknowingly stepped into something much bigger. The so-called FBI agent, who I later learned was named Agent Brooks, had been stationed there with two other operatives for an ongoing investigation. They had been using the cabin as a quiet base of operations to track online criminal activity, mostly fraud and identity theft linked to phishing scams that were circulating through sites like Facebook and Pinterest. The remote location helped them stay off the radar, which was probably why Karen never knew what she was dealing with. And then I realized the awful truth: this whole raid wasn't random. It wasn't about me playing music or breaking phantom HOA rules. It was personal. Linda must have seen unfamiliar faces, maybe even the agents coming and going discreetly, and spun her own story. She'd mentioned something earlier in the week about protecting the community, how outsiders shouldn't be trusted. I thought she was just being nosy. I was wrong. The fake cops didn't back down when the agents identified themselves. One of them even reached into his coat, and that's when things got tense. The room filled with shouting, commands, and heavy footsteps. I ducked behind the kitchen counter, shaking, trying to stay out of the way. Meanwhile, Agent Brooks kept his cool. He had already activated a silent alert. Backup was on the way. But the intruders weren't leaving quietly, and neither was Karen. I saw her standing outside through the window, watching everything unfold like it was a TV show. She didn't look scared. She looked satisfied. That's when I knew this wasn't just about power trips or rules. Something darker was going on. And I was now stuck in the middle of it as I crouched behind the counter, trying to stay out of sight. The chaos didn't stop. One of the intruders shouted something into his wok. Tokia's voice was shaky now. He hadn't expected a federal response. Neither had I. Agent Brooks and the other two agents had taken defensive positions. He was clearly trained for something like this. But what scared me more was the silence that followed. It was the kind of silence that comes right before something explodes. Then I heard boots on the porch, more of them. I peeked up just enough to see that two more fake officers had arrived. They looked just like the first ones. Same dark clothes, same knockoff gear, same stiff postures. I remember thinking, *, where are they getting all this stuff? They looked professional enough to fool anyone at first glance. The FBI team held steady, communicating through small earpieces. I could feel the tension building with every second. Nobody had made a move yet, but it felt like something was about to break. I kept glancing at the window. Karen was still outside. She had a phone in her hand now, filming, as if she was planning to post this mess to her IG story or use it as evidence for one of her HOA Facebook rants. She didn't look scared. She looked proud. Inside the cabin, Agent Brooks whispered something to the others. One of them nodded and slipped quietly toward the back exit. I figured he was going to loop around or maybe signal someone. But the intruders were getting nervous. One of them started pacing, his fingers twitching near his jacket pocket. And then, out of nowhere, my phone buzzed. I had forgotten I left it on the table. The sharp vibrations startled me and him. One of the fake cops spun around toward the sound, raising his voice. "Who else is in here?" Before anyone could answer, Agent Brooks stepped forward, calm but firm. "Stand down. You're outnumbered, and this place is under federal jurisdiction." But the guy didn't care. He shouted back, "You don't give the orders here." It was becoming clear this wasn't some prank or misguided neighborhood drama. Karen had sent these guys in with a purpose. If they weren't real law enforcement, then who were they? Mercenaries? Private contractors? I didn't know. But I had a sinking feeling that whatever was going on, it went deeper than anyone realized. And we were only scratching the surface. The air in the cabin was electric. Every breath felt sharp, like the whole room was waiting to explode. I stayed crouched low, trying to make myself invisible, while Agent Brooks stood tall in the middle. Of it all, fake cop closest to him had one hand near his waistband. And though no one had drawn a weapon yet, I could feel how close we were to the edge. One wrong move, one raised voice, and it would all fall apart. Outside, I saw Karen walking along the porch, peering through every window like she owned the place. She wasn't just watching, she was enjoying it. She had sent these guys here for a reason, and it wasn't just to scare me. I remembered her saying earlier in the week that people who sneak around like ghosts always had something to hide. Maybe she thought she was doing some kind of justice, or maybe she was just drunk on power? Either way, she'd gotten way more than she bargained for. Agent Brooks finally spoke again, slow and measured. "This cabin is part of a federal operation. You've made a mistake. Walk out now, and this ends without charges." But the leader of the fake cops just laughed under his breath. "We didn't come here for a lecture. We came for the files." Files? That was the first time anyone had mentioned files. I felt the hairs on my neck stand up. What files? I looked over at the coffee table where a thick folder lay half covered by a newspaper. Had that been there the whole time? I hadn't noticed it earlier, but maybe Karen or her crew had. And now I realized they weren't here because of me, or noise complaints. They were here for something they thought the FBI was hiding. The agent at the back door still hadn't returned, which made me nervous. Then I caught a glimpse of movement outside. More figures were gathering in the woodsmen in dark clothing, standing just out of sight. Were they with the fake cops? Back up. The lines were blurring fast, and I didn't know who to trust anymore. The leader moved closer to Brooks. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way. But we're not leaving empty-handed." At that moment, I heard the soft crunch of boots behind the cabin. The silence shattered. Everything was about to come to a head and I was still right. In the middle of it, just as the fake cop took another step toward Agent Brooks, the back door burst open hard. A fourth agent returned, but he wasn't alone. Behind him, dragging their feet and hands zip-tied, were two men. I didn't recognize them, but Karen must have, because I saw her face change instantly from smug to stunned.
Oh.
The men were part of her crew? They had been hiding in the woods, probably planning to flank the cabin while everyone inside was distracted. Agent Brooks's voice was sharp. "Looks like we found your missing pieces." The leader of the fake raid stiffened. His bluff was collapsing and fast. But instead of backing off, he doubled down. "You don't know who you're dealing with. This goes higher than your badge." That line chilled me, because the way he said it wasn't a threat. It was a warning. And then the twist hit. One of the agents near the hallway stepped forward, holding up a folder from the bedroom. "Sir, we've got something. It's not just files. This is surveillance from the HOA." That stopped everyone. HOA. I thought Karen was just pretending to run the place, playing neighborhood cop. But no. She had a whole set of cameras hidden on trees and mailboxes, even inside rental cabins. The file had timestamps, footage, names. People who had stayed on the property over the last year? Even me. My hands went cold. Karen wasn't just nosy, she was spying, courting renters, neighbors, even federal agents. And somehow, these men she'd sent knew about it. Maybe she'd promised to sell the footage. Or maybe she'd already shared it, and now they were cleaning up the mess. Whatever it was, this wasn't about fake HOA rules anymore. It was bigger. Brooks looked. Brooks looked from the folder to the intruders, then back to Karen outside. This isn't about property violations. This is data theft. Federal surveillance. Obstruction. Possibly blackmail. His voice was calm, but the weight in it was real. The fake cop leader finally snapped. Do you think that folder's all there is? You think she kept the good stuff here? He laughed bitterly. Check Lowe's. Near me? The storage unit under her name. We'll find out how far this goes. Everything suddenly felt wrong again. Because if Karen had been stockpiling private footage, manipulating people, and working with this crew, what else was she hiding? And more importantly, who else was involved? Agent Brooks gave a signal, and within seconds, the front yard filled. With unmarked vehicles, real backup. It's the kind that didn't flash lights or sound sirens. Tactical agents swept in with precision, surrounding the cabin and the woods beyond. The men who had posed as cops were quickly disarmed and cuffed. One resisted now. Whatever plan they thought they had, it had fallen apart. Karen backed away as they approached her, phone still in hand, recording even as one of the agents calmly instructed her to put it down. She tried to play innocent, claiming she was just monitoring the neighborhood for safety, but her voice trembled. When they mentioned the storage unit near Lowe's, her expression cracked. That was her weak spot. Within minutes, a warrant was issued and local officers were dispatched to search the unit. Inside, they found dozens of labeled drives, folders marked, with people's names and even screenshots from private messages, many from platforms like Facebook and Pinterest. Karen hadn't just been spying, she'd been collecting personal data, possibly selling it. Her entire fake HOA persona had been a front for a small surveillance operation. She ran under the radar. The fake cops she'd sent in. She'd hired them through a private security group that operated in legal gray areas, promising them intel recovery for a hefty payout. As the team packed up evidence, Agent Brooks walked past me and nodded. You're lucky, he said. Wrong cabin, wrong weekend, but maybe the right place after all. I nodded, still trying to process everything. It felt over, or at least like the nightmare had ended. Karen was loaded into the back of a black SUV. No more phone, no more a smug smile. The men she'd hired were heading to federal custody. The property was going to be locked down. I packed my things quickly, not wanting to spend another second in that place. But just as I was about to leave, Brooks pulled out one final file from his bag. We found this on her main drive, he said quietly. Photos of other agents. Real ones, including a few from a case in D.C. last year. He paused, then looked me in the eye. Someone else was feeding her information. Someone inside. I froze. The cabin may have been quiet again, but this wasn't over. Not even close. I left the cabin that evening with the trees still whispering in the wind, and the porch light flickering behind me. Everything looked the same on the outside, but nothing felt normal anymore. What started as a quiet weekend escape had spiraled into something I couldn't have imagined. The local sheriff later confirmed that Karen's storage unit near Lowe's had enough footage and documents to open up multiple investigations. The FBI believed she'd been trading information with shady groups online, some even linked to organized fraud rings using social platforms like Facebook, Reddit, and Pinterest to track victims and build digital profiles. A few days later, Agent Brooks called to give me an update. The case was being moved to a federal court. More names had come up from Karen's files, people she'd spied on, manipulated, or blackmailed. Most of them had no idea she'd been watching. She'd used fake HOA complaints to get into people's homes, install cameras, and collect whatever she could. I couldn't stop thinking about how many of us had just brushed her off as a nosy neighbor. The fake officers she hired were also cooperating now. One of them confessed that they were promised $20,000 to retrieve a specific drive Karen claimed held proof of corruption inside federal ranks. That twist about someone feeding her intel from the inside, that's what haunted me the most. Brooks didn't share names, but said they were tightening security across departments and tracking every digital fingerprint connected to her network. I returned to the city with a lot more than I packed. I couldn't scroll through IG or Facebook without thinking of what could have happened. Every time I saw a Lowe's near me ad or clicked a link on Pinterest, I questioned how much of my digital life was really private. The story made a few local headlines, but never blew up the way it could have. Maybe that's for the best. Maybe not everyone needs to know how close we came to something much worse, in the end. It wasn't just about Karen or her obsession with control. It was about the hidden things people do behind the illusion of power and privacy. I still think about that night sometimes, the dark woods, the sharp silence, the moment everything snapped. I know now, the scariest threats aren't always loud. Sometimes they hide behind a fake badge and a forced smile.